Welcome to Tiny Chair Talks, where we have big conversations in tiny chairs. Today, we're having a conversation that's really hard to talk about, something that makes us feel uncomfortable because it deals with really challenging issues and subjects. We're talking about suicidal thoughts. If you've been dealing with this, or you know someone who has been, this video is for you. Welcome once again to Tiny Chair Talks. Today we have a very special guest, Dr. Matt Tolbert. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So I'm a professor of psychology at Southern Adventist University in Collegedale. And so a lot of what I do is work with students in learning situations, teaching classes, and helping them kind of get a sense of where they're going in their life. And so one of the big things that we try to do is help students find their calling. And I feel like Southern's a good place to do that.
That's amazing. I love that. So we're having a really challenging conversation today, talking about suicidal thoughts. Where do those kind of thoughts even come from?
Well, they usually come born out of depression. So a person is experiencing a severe depressive episode, and they lose the hope to live because of situations in their lives or things that they may have even built up in their own head as being important things. And without hope, then what's the point? And so individuals can often choose suicide as an option for them.
And what causes someone to arrive to those initial questions, like if I have hope, or is my life worth living? What are the things that a person could go through that causes them to go down that path?
Well, it's varied. You know, it's going to be up to everyone's personal experience. Some very common things are loss, a loved one, loss of identity, individuals experiencing things like bullying. When we start to lose our place within our community and we are embarrassed or rejected, then these feelings can creep up. The depressive feelings can creep up, and then we start to question whether or not we should be continuing to exist in this world. And what's the point if I don't have the connections that I want, if I don't have the hope for my future, then why is it that I continue to live? Maybe I should just end it all.
And when someone is dealing with suicidal thoughts, is it typical for that person to share that with another, or is it more of something that's subtle and quiet in a person's life?
So typical is a very difficult word to use. I don't know that there's a lot of typical. It is common for an individual who is contemplating suicide to voice that to someone. Now, it's not always clearly stated. It's not always clearly, I am going to hurt myself. Sometimes it's spoken of around the edges of that, and it requires someone to ask the question. Of course, it's difficult to ask a question like that because you don't want to hear the answer. If the answer is, yeah, I'm going to hurt myself. But if we don't ask the question and we're not sure, then that's when we live in ambiguity, and they might say, well, I thought I was saying this, I thought I was telling you, but you didn't seem to understand me, and that's even one more reason then to end my life.
How common are suicidal thoughts? You know, if we think of a room full of people, is there a chance that a lot of them have dealt with it before?
Well, it's hard to say. Depression is very common. So we have, at any one time, 16% of the population is probably experiencing depression at some level. And usually when we think about depression, diagnosable clinical depression, we're talking about severe enough that suicidal thoughts could be a part of that. But it really does vary based upon a person's experience. So you might have a group of 100 people, and maybe you have 2, or maybe you have 10, or maybe you have 20, depending on what's going on. The prevalence of suicide, that is completed suicide, where they truly do finish ending their lives, that is somewhere around, I think, in 2020, I think it was 2019, it was 13.9 individuals per 100,000 people. So that puts it closer to about 1.5% of people might be experiencing suicidal thoughts, or I should say ending their lives. More people than that would probably experience suicidal thoughts.
And what's the difference between a suicidal thought and just kind of contemplating the end of one's life?
So context is everything. It's actually, I would say, probably psychologically valuable to contemplate the end of one's life. It brings meaning to one's life. And we have many famous examples of people who were thinking about the end of their lives and how it brought more meaning to them when they kind of realized what was going on. We have individuals who were part of the Holocaust in the 1940s, and we have individuals throughout history in different kinds of experiences, and contemplating their life kind of helps them understand a little bit more how important life is to keep going. And so that can actually be a really interesting endeavor. I actually sometimes ask my own students to think about, okay, let's say you pass on, and what kind of a legacy would you like to leave? How would you like people to remember you? And that can be a very helpful way of saying, well, give me more intention about how I want to live my life, so that I do live it in a way that when people remember me, it's warmly and happily, maybe. Suicidal ideation is completely different. Suicidal ideation is, in this moment right now, I am thinking that I should no longer live because no one would want me to continue to live, including myself. And so that is of more immediate concern. And it's dangerous because someone, if they have the means to accomplish this, they will accomplish this. This is not an if. It's a if. Well, the if, I guess there is an if. The if is, do you have the means? They will do it. If they are feeling this way and they don't have something happen to step in to stop them, they will complete this task, this final task for them. So it's certainly much more immediate concern, and it's born out of depression. Whereas contemplating the end of one's life is born out of a reflection over the kind of person I want to be in my identity. Suicidal ideation is, I am feeling depressed, I have no hope, I might as well not live.
What are the signs and symptoms of a person dealing with suicidal thoughts?
So there are a lot of things. A lot of times when a person is experiencing suicidal ideation, they start to talk in ways that are more fatalistic. They may ask, for instance, they may choose to change their behavior, to put their affairs in order, is sometimes the way that we refer it. That is to say, kind of tie off any loose ends, make sure that whoever is taken care of is taken care of, and say goodbye. Often they'll get into this process of saying goodbye to the people who were important in their lives. And through that process, then they're kind of preparing themselves for that. This is all born out of depression. So it's important that we recognize what depression looks like and when someone is experiencing that, so that then we are more aware if someone starts to behave in ways that might lead them toward depression, towards suicide, that we will see it, be aware of it, and then can step in and potentially prevent that.
Is it possible that everyone who deals with depression could end up having suicidal thoughts, or is it possible that they might not get to that point?
They may not get to that point. Severe depression, which is a clinical designation, is most associated with suicidal ideation. There are other kinds of experiences that people might have that would lead them to depression. and then lead them to suicidal ideation that may happen much more quickly than just feeling down for a little while. So it can happen much more rapidly than just I'm feeling down for a couple of weeks and now I'm going to hurt myself. So I should probably qualify that by saying, yes, depression can lead to that, but there may be other circumstances that might lead them to do so. That being said, there are, like I said, over 16% of the population at any time might be dealing with clinical depression. Not all of them are contemplating suicide. So certainly there is a chance. And when you're dealing with depression, there's always a chance that someone might slip into thoughts of suicide, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah. What if someone approaches me and tells me they're dealing with these kind of thoughts? What should I do?
That's a great question. Do not leave them. Stay with them at all times. They do not go anywhere by themselves. You're able to stay with them, see them, talk with them, continue to be in their presence. That's key. Getting alone at any moment, if they have the means they could try to go through with it. So stay with them in the moment. Do not let them out of your sight. That's the first thing. The second thing, contact emergency services. 911, I have an individual here who says that they're contemplating suicide and we need help. And give them the information. Do that in front of them if necessary. And what I would say is, even if they don't want you to, do it. Even if they don't want you to, do it. I remember when before I was working at Southern, I was working at another institution, and I had a student who came into my office, and she was talking about this experience that she was having, and she said, you know what, I feel like there's no really any point for me living. And then as soon as she said that, I was like, okay, wait a minute, what? And so then I pointedly asked her, are you having thoughts like this? What are your thoughts? Exactly what are your thoughts? And she convinced me that she would go through with it, and it was imminent. So I said, I feel for your safety. I don't want you to leave my sight right now. I'm going to call the crisis response, and you're going to stay with me until they get here. And I ended up taking her and walking her up to a place where the crisis response would show up. And that is the key. You cannot stop them from feeling this way, but you can stop them from doing anything. Because any thoughts of suicide is a temporary situation, a temporary state. Because you get past this state, get them some treatment, help lift their depression a little bit, the thoughts of suicide will go away. More time, I would say 99.9% of the time. So for that very reason then, you don't want to leave them alone. You want to stay with them until they get to a point where they can be lifted out of that depression. And they may be mad at you in the moment, or usually not. If they bring it up that they've brought it up to you, what they're doing is saying, I don't want you to leave me. I want you to be here. I want you to help me. And so this is what you do. Stay with them, crisis response, stay with them until the crisis gets there. And then you let it go. And you let the crisis then can take them from that point forward.
Okay. You know, is there a particular age range where suicidal thoughts happen more often?
So, yes. Adult men in their 40s.
Really?
Yeah, so me. Mm-hmm. Individuals, adult men in their 40s are the most likely to, I think there's something like twice as likely as women to do that. That does not mean that there aren't, in your teenage years, we hear about teen suicide a lot. And a lot of teen suicide is based off of bullying. Bullying online, bullying in school or whatever. And then we do have some that might even experience that in early adulthood. Early adulthood does not tend to be a time period when a lot more suicide happens. It's usually 40s or even late adulthood when that might happen, but it still does. It still does, because you still are engaged with the community, and that if you feel ostracized from that community or bullied out of that community or suffer a great loss, that could slip you into depression and therefore slip you into suicidal thoughts.
I always thought suicidal thoughts was a long-term thing, because I think of thoughts as plural, as something that's happening every day. Is that the case, or does suicidal thoughts sometimes come less frequently?
So most of the time, it's a temporary state. During that state, the thoughts can be extremely prevalent. It could be every moment you're contemplating it, or it's a constant thought of how am I going to do this? How can I make this happen? What will my parents think? What will my friends think? What will my girlfriend or boyfriend think, or whatever? And so we think about these things, and how will I do it? Is there a way that I can do it that will help? Do I need to write this note? And so it's like a constant thing in the moment. But like I said, this is a temporary state. If we can get past that temporary state and lift the depression, then those thoughts go away. And that's the ideal. That's what we want, is those thoughts. So you don't have to live with it. Now, there are a couple of contexts within which somebody might have recurring thoughts. And that is with certain kinds of disorders. There's something called bipolar personality. It's not constant, but it could recur and happen. Every time they slip into a depression, that can happen. Borderline personality disorder is an individual who might make multiple self-harming attempts in their lifetime and over the course of, so that it's a recurring kind of issue. So there are certain disorders that are fairly rare overall that probably lend itself toward self-harming behavior. But for someone dealing with depression, it's a temporary state.
Got it.
And then you lift out of it, and then you feel better, you grow, you improve, you go to counseling, you get treatment, and then you can move on from there.
Does the Bible talk anything about suicidal thoughts?
That's a very good question. There are certainly events of suicide. The first one that jumps to mind is King Saul. He was faced with this moment of losing everything, and he knew David was going to take over the kingdom. His son dies, and he's basically lost his entire identity. And so he asks his sword bearer to kill him, and the sword bearer's like, no, I can't do that. So he said, fine, and he falls on his own sword. There have been moments of suicide events. And so definitely the fact that suicide happens means that he was thinking about it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you think about it, it's the complete loss of identity. It's the complete loss of community. His whole position is gone. He is going to be relegated to slaves of the Philistines or whatever David might want to do after that. And so for this reason, he is at his lowest possible level. If they had been able to get him off that battlefield, get him back to his tent or his palace or wherever it was, and help him to recover, he probably would have not felt that way. He probably would have been able to overcome it. But because in that moment, the weight of everything hit him in that moment, and he had the means, he went through with it.
What do you think God's feelings are towards suicidal thoughts?
So this is a controversial point. The traditional Christian church, Middle Ages and before, deemed suicide one of the unpardonable sins. It cannot be forgiven because you're dead. And so the Catholic Church adopted this view and promoted the idea that if you kill yourself, then you are at best in a limbo state, at worst in hell. Now, Adventists, we don't believe in a literal hell that exists at this point. But we are still subject to the same kind of beliefs about the sinfulness of suicide that has contributed to so many people being silent when they have these thoughts and these feelings. I believe that God understands mental illness. That mental illness is the product of living in a sinful world, the product of the horrible suffering that we all experience, and it's something that the mind triggers based upon the trauma that we experience in our lives. It overwhelms us at times. I believe God understands, and I believe that the action taken of suicide, while in that state, I don't believe that God would say that you cannot be saved from something like that. I mean, the whole reason that Jesus died is to save us from this state, this suffering, this pain that we're in. It's the whole reason he died for us, so that he could bring us out of that. And so I absolutely reject the idea that if you take your own life, that you are now unlovable and unforgivable and therefore lost forever. I absolutely believe that Jesus says, I know what you experience. I'm so sad in this moment that this happened, but I have for you grace. I have for you love. I have for you forgiveness. And we will be reconciled again.
That's powerful. What are some practical tips that you can give to someone who has contemplated death before?
Well, practical. I would say, depending on how often it has happened for this person, I would say stay connected to people, friends, a support network, whoever that may be. If it's family, great. If it's not, and it's friends, great. But stay connected to a support network. And work on developing friendships where you can be open and honest in those moments. That's hard for us to do.
Yeah.
It's extremely hard for us to do, but it's paramount if we're going to be able to overcome any kind of moment like this. Because the one thing, if you had a friend that came to you to say, I've been thinking about this, the reason they're coming to you is because they believe that you are a person they can come to. And if a person doesn't have that, then who are they going to go to? So stay connected. Stay connected is first off. Second, be aware of the overall support that's out there. We have suicide crisis hotlines. We have a number of services, depending on where you are. There are a number of services, like at the university. We have a number of services. We have a counseling service. We have deans. We have other people who are willing to step in and say, yes, we can help you in this moment. So be aware of what services are available to you, that you can reach out and know that they are available to you. Crisis hotlines, suicide hotlines have been life-saving for so many people because they didn't have anybody else to talk to, but as soon as they get on that call, they're able to, I can move past this moment. It's temporary. I can have hope again.
I really appreciate that. And for the person who has had these thoughts and feels maybe scared to be exposed or feels concerned that there will be someone out there who knows that I'm dealing with this, what would you say to them?
I fear our society in the U.S. is becoming more isolated. We experienced that during the pandemic. I mean, we have social media, we have Zoom, or whatever. We have these options that are intended to connect us, but what they give us is a semblance of connection without true connection. And so I fear that we are becoming more isolated as a society, less likely to have that support network. What I would say, and I would hope, is that the church could be a place where hurt people can come and find healing. I mean, this is what Jesus offers, but he uses people to do it. And it's unfortunate that in our past, the church has not been a place where we can find that kind of connection, that kind of support. But I will say this, that I believe is changing. We have churches now that have counseling services as a part of their organization. They have pastors who are trained as counselors to assist them in that. There are support groups that come as a part of a church organization. There are a number of larger churches, especially that have in place an understanding that mental health is of value to us and important for us to focus on, and they provide different services available to those individuals who might need them. So I think that the church might be changing and coming to a new understanding of the importance of mental health, and that is hopeful to me. Unfortunately, it doesn't change the past that anybody might have experienced before, and they may have felt rejected by the church. And that's when these other options are available, crisis hotlines and things. But in the end, I wouldn't, this is not a message to those people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts. This is a message to the rest of us who are not. Is that, are we going to be able to provide an atmosphere of love, of Christ-like love and support for those people who might be hurting? Can we do that in such a way that those people who can be hurting are coming to us, seeking out healing through Christ, and then we are providing the support where that healing can be found? Are we doing that? I don't know. I think that there are some that are, but I think that we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, it's like we have a responsibility on us to allow those thoughts to be brought up if there's someone in the church going through it.
Being open about that is really hard, and you can't be open unless you feel that you trust the community. You can't be open if you don't feel as if that you're going to be supported. And so we must create that atmosphere. We must create that openness so that someone, when they feel this, can come and be open and honest with us. Because it's very difficult to expect a person who's dealing with depression and suicidal thoughts where they feel hopeless. It's very difficult for us to say, well, just come talk to us when you feel that way.
If it's not a safe space.
It's if it's not safe. If they don't feel safe, then why? Why are they going to come to you? So our job as Christians, as followers of Jesus, who is the way and the truth and the life, if we're going to offer the kind of love that he calls us to do, it must include this.
That's super meaningful. Thank you so much, Dr. Tolbert, for sharing your insights on this really challenging topic. Now, if you're dealing with these kind of thoughts, if suicide has come across your mind, we want to let you know that there's hope for your situation. You don't have to live with those thoughts. There's also a number that you can call if you're dealing with it. 1-800-273-8255. We're so thankful that you have joined Tiny Chair Talks, where we have big conversations in tiny chairs. We invite you to continue joining us in our next videos. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to see some more, check out any of these two right next to me.